raised on jackrabbits and
Horse and
ground.
buggy. It was Ivy, but I didn't like Ivy, so I changed it to Iva.
This is August 20th, 1984. Joe Todd and Bernice Jackson.
I was born in 1892.
1892. Interviewing Mrs. Iva Dixon.
Iva Merrill.
Merrill.
Iva Merrill. My parents were Perry and Eunice Merrill.
Yeah.
It's in the book there.
Man, where were you born?
In Iowa. Let me see. I can't think of the name of the. I've got it written down someplace,
Yeah.
but
When's your birthday?
it's the 17th of April.
And what year?
What?
1892?
Mm-hmm.
And who'd you say your father was?
Perry Merrill. He came from Missouri, and his father owned a big homestead and all there in Iowa. Let me get my paper here. Let's see.
What was your mother's name?
Eunice Tabler.
And where was she from?
Just a minute now, I'll get these things.
Do you want to look at this? She was from Tells here.
Mm-hmm. Eunice Frances Tabler. She was born in Sandridge, Illinois. Near Sandridge, that was on the farm. And her parents, you want their names?
Yeah.
Jane and Elias Tabler, Tabler, Tabler.
Where were they from?
Well, they were always there in Illinois, as far as I know. They'd always.
And what about your husband's parents? Where were they from?
You mean Floyd?
Hal,
I mean,
Hugh
Yeah.
McCormick, her husband.
Yeah. Okay.
She was married.
Your father's parents.
She was married.
My first husband was Hubert McCormick.
Yeah.
And let's see, where did they come from, the McCormicks, to begin?
Iowa.
Iowa. Oh yes.
What about your father's parents? Where were they from?
Well, that was Merrill. They were from Missouri. Mm-hmm. And like I said, his father owned this land there in Iowa, and he finally came over there to work for his father. And my mother's brother, her sister's husband moved there to Iowa, right close, and she came over there to visit him, and she met my father there, and that was how they met and got married and all. And
were either one of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
what is it?
Were either one of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
No. Don't think so. Grandfather Tabler, I'm sure wasn't. I know my grandfather Merrill wasn't.
What kind of work did your father do?
My father? A farm. He farmed. Mm-hmm.
When you were a little girl, what kind of chores did you do in the farm?
What
kind of chores did you do in the farm as a little girl?
Well, I just don't know for sure. Now, that's after we came to Oklahoma, you mean, and settled down.
No, when you were a little girl.
Well, I was a little girl when we came to Oklahoma.
Oh, how old were you when
I
you
was
came
just
to
5 years old.
Do you remember the trip?
Oh, sure.
Tell me about it.
Well, okay, like I said, my mother met him there in Iowa, and they got married. My mother, Eunice Frances Tabler, was born at the farm home of her parents, Jane and Elias Tabler, near Sandridge, Illinois, on September the 7th, 1871. She was the fifth of 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls. Her sister Hannah died in her teens of grippe. They called it grippe then, what's flu. Her brother Lloyd died at the age of 7, and mother got her education at the Sandridge School and grew to womanhood on the farm. Now, do you want any more than
Well, did you come to Oklahoma by wagon?
to Oklahoma?
Yeah.
No, on the train.
On the train.
Yes. Oh, they didn't none of them ever came in a covered wagon.
Tell
at
me
all.
about the wagon, the train trip.
Mhm.
Tell me about the trip on the train.
Well, now just let
Come
me
on,
think
back,
back.
Frank.
Just let me think back a little bit now. We stayed there in Iowa, and my father had heard of this land in Oklahoma for filing. He could go file on some land, and he wanted some land of his own. And well, anyway, I can read it or tell it like it is.
Oh, just
And
tell
so
me.
he and a neighbor, Mr. Jordan, I know you knew the Jordans or not, they came on the train and they came down to Oklahoma. They'd heard of the Persimmon Flats. You've heard of those, I suppose. That anyway, they came on the train and they came to Woodward, and they had a man with a team and wagon to take them down to where these Persimmon Flats were and look at the land and everything. And they went back to Woodward and filed. Each one of them filed on a quarter section, and it just cost them $17 to file on a quarter section of land then. And then they went back and they first dug a well. Then they dug a big cave. And you want me to go on?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Mhm. Well, these caves, you've probably seen some of the old time caves, haven't you?
No.
Well, they just dug great big. How deep did they dig, Floyd?
What?
On the cave, how deep did they go down with
Oh, I don't know. You were
the
down.
walls?
You mean a dugout? What they
Yeah,
call a
dugout. Dugout. I meant instead of a cave, I mean a dugout.
Oh, 8 feet.
About 8 feet deep.
6 to 8 feet.
Mhm. You probably remember about those.
Well, I don't remember them, but I've interviewed people, and they dug down about 6 feet where there was a level place, and then
Yeah.
they took some sod. Is that right?
No.
Broke sod
No.
to build up a little wall, and then
No.
no.
No, they just dug that, and the walls, all dirt walls around, and then they went to the river and got a pole and they laid it this way all across the top, and then they got smaller trees and branches and laid crosswise, and then they filled that all with dirt and leaves and dirt and all, and made a good roof on it, and it was cool in the summer, but they well, here it says, did you want to read it or you
No,
don't?
you
Well,
go ahead. You just tell us.
Well-
we want you to talk.
Well,
to us.
so then we lived in the dugout.
And your father filed on 160 acres?
Yes.
Where
Yeah,
was the plant?
when he and his neighbor came to Oklahoma together, came to Woodward, and each one went to the courthouse, and each one filed on a quarter section of land. Then they went back home and got prepared to move, you see, and all, and now that's when the first thing they did was dig a well,
Sure.
and
Water is very
each one of
important.
them. And but of course they dug the cave quick as they could so they'd have some place to stay. Well, and they came to Woodward and tried to find a quarter section that looked good and was level. Of course the best was already taken, so they finally located some near what is now Mutual. My father staked his claim 4 miles southeast of Mutual, and Mr. Jordan staked one west. I guess I read that. They went back to town and prepared to move to Oklahoma. Together they had a freight car of the things they would need. Mother and we 2 children went to Illinois to stay with her mother until Father got settled. They brought their wagon, walking plows, and a harrow. Also a team of horses, a cow, a few chickens, and some pigs. They shipped the car to Curtis, Oklahoma.
Where's Curtis?
Curtis. Well, it's what's Moreland now.
Okay.
That was Curtis, you know.
Yeah.
There wasn't any Moreland for a long time.
What was the inside of the dugout furnished?
What is it?
How was the inside of the dugout
Well,
furnished?
you see, they brought their beds and the bedding and all those things, you know, with them on the
How big was
freight
the
car.
dugout?
what is it?
How big was the dugout? How wide and how
Oh,
long?
I don't
8
know.
by 10.
8 by 10?
Yeah. Had a green wood roof out of limbs and stuff, and it rotted and fell in. It did. My aunt and uncle, they had it fall in.
Ours never did. They went to, now it was 35 miles to Woodward with a team and wagon. They couldn't make that in a day, you know. They had to camp overnight. So they got some windows, and it tells about that. But there wasn't any, let's see.
What about chores on the farm after you came to Oklahoma?
What is it?
What kind of chores did you do on the farm after you came to
Oh,
Oklahoma?
I didn't do any chores.
You didn't?
No.
How come?
Not that no, they didn't. I just don't remember doing the chores. I had my brother, you know, he was just a little younger than I was, and of course he worked on the farm, did all those things, and
You didn't help feed the chickens?
I don't know about that. See, I was just, well, but anyway, the first thing, too, they put out a big garden, and they didn't need to water a thing. There was plenty of rain and everything, and they grew raised just about everything they ate except the meat and all out of that garden. And there was plenty of prairie chickens and such things that for meat, you know. But he says here he brought a hog, some pigs, and they butchered a pig, and then of course they had to just fry the meat down to keep it, you know. They just fried it all, cooked it, and rendered the lard out, and
Did you help render lard?
what?
Did you help render lard?
No, they wouldn't allow a little girl like me to worry with something like that. I might get burned, you know.
Mhm.
But they had what they called a topsy stove. Did you ever see a topsy stove?
No, ma'am.
And it had an oven in the pipe. There was an oven built right across, right in the pipe, and that's where they baked everything. And for fuel, I just don't remember what they used.
Where'd you start to school?
What is it?
Where did you start to school?
Oh, well, I didn't for a good long time. See, my parents left. They sold their farm, and they bought another farm and 9 miles southwest of Woodward. From here, let me get a. Well, anyway, I can't think of the name of the man that owned the farm, but anyway, I just went to the country school then, you know, just a kid I was, and they finally sold this farm and moved to Woodward. They moved to another farm. Now let me see. I don't think that's in here.
Do you have any stories of the Spanish-American War that you heard
No.
as 1898?
I remember the Spanish-American War, all right. About it.
Tell me what
know.
you remember about it.
Oh, I just remember that they had the United States fought the Spanish-American War. That's about all I know about that.
You didn't have any relatives in the
No,
war?
no.
Do you remember the Depression and the dirt storm days?
Oh, yes. Oh, boy. I had several. Well, I was married to Hubert, and I, was married when the dust storm came and all that, that was.
Describe a dust storm. What does it look? Describe a dust storm.
Well, let me think now. I try to remember where we was living at that time, south of Woodward, and I had my oldest son. My son, he was born. Or he was grown then. When the dust storm hit, of course, he drove a car and all that. And but I had two younger children. And a certain Sunday, we'd heard so much about the Dust Bowl, so we bought a new car, a new Chevy, and we said, let's drive out there and see what it's like. You've heard this before, I suppose, about the Dust Bowl?
No.
So we drove out there. We left the two small children with the neighbors, and one of the couple went with us, another couple, and my son drove, and so we went out there, and so we stopped at Beaver, Oklahoma, a little while, and then when we turned north from Beaver, here's Beaver here, and we turned north. Well, there was a big black wall, just a big black wall, just black, and every little bit of colored strip, rainbow deal. We said, what's that? He said, it's dust storm. So we turned and drove. They drove as fast as they could. We'd seen this house we passed, but it overtook us before we got to the house. And we went in, we managed to get in the house. And when we drove in, their windmill electricity was just going like that, on their windmill. And we got in the house, everything was covered with dirt, completely covered with dirt. And so we saw the Dust Bowl all right. But
What day was that? The year? Do you remember?
no, I don't.
Was that Black Sunday?
Probably was.
April the 14th?
You probably remember all about
I
the Dust Bowl.
remember the Black Sunday.
Mm-hmm. Now that might have been what they called it. But,
Did it just get so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face that day?
Well, I guess it wasn't that bad there. But anyway, that was pretty bad. It lasted several years, I guess, didn't it, the Dust Bowl deal?
Yeah.
Now, what else do you want to...
Do you remember World War I?
What?
World War I.
Oh, yes.
1917, 1918.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do during the war?
Oh, Mama,
Did you have anybody in the service?
No.
Nobody, none of your relatives in the war?
I never did have any of my son didn't have to go to World War II either because or one of the wars, he had a family.
Did you do any work with the Red Cross during the First War?
No. About all I ever did was teach school.
Yeah. What about Armistice Day?
What is it?
Armistice Day.
I can't get what?
November 11th, 1918, when the war ended.
Oh. Well, I was married then, of course, and I had two children, and my brother Lloyd was he was stationed on a ship over off California, and when the war ended, why, 1918, you know, it ended, why, of course he came home. And, no, I didn't, all the wars, none of my folks ever had to go, except he never went out and fought, he just was stationed on this ship. And when it was over, why, he came home, and everybody was down with the flu. You remember that old
The
flu?
flu epidemic of 1918.
Yes.
How bad was that?
And my husband had pneumonia with it, and the children had it. My son, he coughed and was awful bad. I never took it at all. I've never had the flu, and I've been around it a lot. They say that the doctor says that just immune. I've never had the flu, so that I remember that real well because everybody was down with it. Well, so we lived there on this farm, and we would go to Woodward. Like I told you, we couldn't make it in a day. We'd had to camp over. But it says Woodward's main street was about 3 blocks long of dirt with wooden sidewalks. All the stores had false fronts, and about every other building was a saloon. We were happy to get to our new house. Yes, they were. Just Floyd can tell you a lot about that, about the saloons.
Saloons in Woodward?
13 saloons here.
13 saloons.
And a woman was not allowed in a saloon.
How come?
Just that way. My mother started in a saloon one day. She goes out of the grocery store and they looked at her so, and she backed out. And we had a neighbor that his wife pooled the saloon, and she had to wear men's clothes to go in the saloons. It was that way. It ain't like it is now.
It ought to be that way. Well, Floyd isn't, I can say he never took a drink in his life. So, but then,
What did the saloons do with all the whiskey at Statehood?
what is it?
You know, at Statehood, Prohibition came in 1907. What did the saloons do with all the whiskey and beer?
That they had on hands. What did the saloons do with
Oh,
them?
I don't know anything about that. But you remember about Jack Love taking the girls down to see the new governor at Guthrie? Well, I was one of them. Jack Love was a big, I don't know, he was a farmer. What was he? Rancher, big rancher. And he was running for the Corporation Commission. That he was running for that job, and he told all the farmers and all the men there in Woodward, the older men that had families, if they voted for him, he'd take their girls to see the governor elected. And so I got to go. He took 80-some girls.
Which governor was this?
What is it?
Which governor?
Haskell?
Did you see Haskell inaugurated?
Oh, sure.
Tell me about that.
Oh, let me see. It's in here somewhere.
Did you see the wedding between Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory?
Saw them get married.
What was she wearing, Miss Indian Territory?
I don't remember what she wore.
Well, that was quite a thrilling time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's quite a deal, like going over there. Taking all them girls.
What?
Taking all them girls.
You can't find it
Tell me
in here?
about Jack Love.
While you're telling him about Jack Love, I'll look for this.
Well, it's I'm back over this way some, I think.
Who was Jack Love?
You know, I never saw him at all hardly all the time we was all going. He went to Anthony, wasn't it? No, Kiowa. We got on the train here. There was 80 girls of us, and we got on the train here in Woodward and went to Kiowa. And then he took a Pullman from there and took us down to Guthrie
Here it is, right here.
on November 16, 1907.
Why don't you read that paragraph? That's interesting.
On November the 16th, 1907, Oklahoma was admitted to the Union as the 46th state, and I was fortunate enough to attend the inauguration of the first governor, Charles Haskell, at Guthrie. Jack Love, a cattleman from Woodward, was running for corporation commissioner. While campaigning, he promised farmers and ranchers that if he won, he would take their daughters to Guthrie for Statehood Day, and he kept his promise. There were about 75 girls and only one boy that made the trip. You've probably heard this before.
No, ma'am.
No, just
Well,
interesting.
And we had a chaperone for each 5 girls. A chaperone for each 5 girls. We went on the train to Kiowa, Kansas, and there we chartered a special Pullman. Going to bed on a train was a new experience for most of us, and we had lots of fun. At the inauguration in Guthrie, we saw a parade and listened to 2 speeches, and there was a mock wedding of Oklahoma and Indian territories. Guthrie remained the state capital for almost 3 years before it was transferred to Oklahoma City in June 1910. Well, that's that. And
That's good.
That is.
That's real good. We're glad to get that information.
well, of course,
Did you ever play the organ or piano?
I play the piano in here.
Oh, you do?
So I'm the only one in here that can play the piano. I guess I play it every
I
morning.
need to go down next phone call.
Okay. I'll visit with her.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
I see here in your book it's 1913. I was teaching the home school, Pleasant View. How long did you teach
Well, I
there?
taught school. My first school was, it was 9 miles north and 2 west, the Senate School. And I think I was 17 when I started teaching that. And I had all grades, of course, you
Yes,
know,
all
all
in
grades in
grades.
one-room schoolhouse.
Yes. How many pupils?
Just like I said in there,
Well, I haven't read it.
they
in here.
stressed,
Probably
they
about.
stressed the 3 R's and all that. They stressed it. And I said many a champion speller was made in those days.
That's right.
Yes,
You're right.
because we stressed reading, writing, and arithmetic, and kids were wanted in education. They would walk 2 miles sometimes when it was stormy and all, you know.
Did you have spelling matches on Friday
yes.
afternoon?
And they always brought the little kids to them, you know, they'd have spelling matches. I mean, at night they'd have programs, and that's when they brought the little kids literary, you know.
Yes.
But anyway, in the afternoon on Friday, every Friday, they would just really enjoyed coming. You probably did that.
Choose up sides.
I bet you taught school.
Yes, I taught school. But I could remember in my school, when I was going to school, we'd choose up sides, just the
Yes.
students,
They did.
and and then we'd have ciphering matches.
Yes. Arithmetic.
You know, those were educational play things, weren't they? It was just play for us, but they were educational.
Oh yes, I think that they. That's what I said. There's many a champion speller. Well, I taught 5 years of school, and then I got married.
Did you teach after you were married?
No, no.
Well, how many children did you have now altogether?
Oh, I had 4 children, but
4 children. Says here, when we moved to Woodward, Mother played the organ for Sunday school and programs we had at the schoolhouse.
yes, and then we'd have picnics, you know, too. On the 4th of July, we'd have picnics, and they had an organ out in the grove, you know, and Mother played that, and we sang and all. She learned to play the piano when she was a girl at home before she got married.
Yes. Well, now, in the early days, did they have picnics out here where the boiling springs are now? Would they go out in there for picnics?
The Mason Grove, it's in southwest of town, of Woodward. was where they had the picnics there. Oh, I guess they must have had picnics north of Woodward, didn't they, Floyd?
What?
Used to have picnics north of town up here in the what grove was that?
Oh, just a mile north of town there.
Just a
On
mile.
the east side,
I can't think of
west
it.
side.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't think of the name.
No, I can't.
What the?
McPherson?
McPherson.
McPherson Grove.
McPherson Grove, yeah.
Mhm.
Let's see.
The whole country would go up there at picnics. Persimmons, they had a lot of persimmons.
Yes. That's why they call it persimmon.
Lots of persimmons.
Now this is about my daughter, Maureen.
Uh-huh.
You ever?
And I haven't written very much of Floyd's
Now,
history.
here's Floyd.
That's Floyd's history.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Floyd. He was born January the 24th, 1894 at Miltonville,
Kansas.
Kansas. His mother, Mary Sheen, taught school and met his father, John A. Dixon, who was school superintendent. They later married, and to this union 3 sons were born. John, the oldest, was born in Concordia, Kansas. 5 years later, Floyd was born. And 4 years later, his parents moved to Shattuck, Oklahoma. Then later, when he was 7 years old, they moved to Woodward, and his father was county superintendent of Woodward County. They later moved to a farm east of Woodward, and Floyd attended the Red Rock School. After his parents' death, he and his brother Harold worked on the farm, and later on Floyd worked for Lee Wilson in the construction business, and during World War II, 3 years at the air base west of Woodward. After Harold's death in 1960, he lived alone, and on December the 13th,
Gerlach
Hopkins
Hopkins.
grocery store.
Gerlach Hopkins.
That's about all I remember.
Well, Morrison's was on the north side of the street, and
Oh, they was all up and down the street. Just little old stores.
yes.
You take $500 to our store.
yes.
They what?
There's no wall.
Where was the oldest lady out here at the museum that run a red light district?
Oh,
What was her name? Do you
Who?
remember? The lady that run the red light district here in Woodward.
I don't know. I didn't know anything about
she
it.
was killed in the tornado of 1947. What was her name? Was it Ruby or
Oh, I can't.
or Eliza?
Her real name was Eliza, but she went by a different her. Was it Dolly?
It could have been. I'm not
You
sure.
know, I'm talking about the woman that wore the red dress and he
Yes,
got
yes.
killed,
Yes, we
got
can't.
shot. Well, who was that, Floyd?
What?
The woman that wore the red dress and caused her boyfriend to get killed, you know. She wore.
John Dillinger, you getting off on that?
Well, he asked me about it.
John Dillinger, she
Dillinger.
betrayed him. She lost her mind afterwards.
That wasn't in Woodward, though.
No, that was
No.
Where was
nothing to do
that?
with us.
Oh, that wasn't in Woodward.
Oh, no.
No.
I don't know
No.
where that was. No, that wasn't in Woodward.
I can't think of the lady's name.
John Dillinger.
Well, I don't want to think I want to think
They
of
shot
it.
him down just like he was.
It probably is the one you. She ran the red light district in Woodward.
Well, there was a hotel on 8th Street here that we heard it was that kind of a
North side that.
what?
On north
On the
side
north
of
side
house.
place, but of course we never saw it
No.
just from.
Mhm.
They say it just from. We just heard that, and I
Yeah.
don't
Were you
know.
here for the tornado of 1947?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Oh, sure, she's here. She lives out on a farm.
Yes,
That
we
was-
live
that was an awful
6
night.
miles southeast.
Yeah.
Did you see the funnel cloud?
No, we sure heard it though. Well, I can tell you about a tornado earlier than that. Then I'll tell you about the
Okay.
other one. Like I told you, we moved to a farm southwest of Woodward, And there's a little pond on the farm there, and my younger sister and my brother always liked to go down there and fish. Well, all day the sky had been ugly looking and red, and the air, it was just hot. There wasn't any air. So my mother said, now don't stay very long at the pond because it looks like a cyclone day. They called them cyclones then. And so about an hour or two after that, the sky just got red and it just got real hot, and pretty soon there come a big old funnel cloud coming down, just traveling right down black, it was, and when before we went to the storm cellar, my father had a team of bay horses, and they snorted and ran just as hard as they could to the farthest corner of the pasture when they saw that coming. Well, we went to the storm cellar and we could hear it go past, It went between our house and our neighbor's house, and never heard anything there. But when we come out, those horses were standing up by our corral under a tree. They'd come down through that tree. They had carried them from the far corner of the pasture because neighbors saw them go up in the air, and saw them, the horses up in the air, and it dropped them right there under that tree. And one of them's foot was broke off, and of course they couldn't do it, they had to kill it, of course. But anyway, that was one thing that I don't suppose very many people ever got to see. And that was the way
It didn't damage your house?
No.
No?
No, our houses, my neighbors, we were a quarter mile apart, and it never touched either one of them. And it killed our cows, of course. Just wrapped the barbed wire all around them, just barbed. Oh, and then we still hear things about the Woodward tornado. Where were you living then?
I was up in Bartlesville.
Bartlesville. Mm-hmm. That sound like, I said I will just believe anything that I hear about a tornado, because there's just anything that you wouldn't believe at all.
Mm-hmm. How big was that Woodward tornado?
Oh, I don't know. It was big enough.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of electricity in that. Followed the railroad all the way, I believe it was electricity that did it. No, that's what I thought.
How many people were killed in that tornado?
80 people were killed, and how many were injured, Floyd?
100 and something.
1,000, wasn't
100
there?
and something was killed.
100 and something killed and 1,000 injured. I guess that was it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we heard that it had been a bad storm, and my son went to town to see, and he come back, and so we all went, because my husband's brother lived in Woodward, and my parents, and we all went to town, and animals were just plastered with that gray mud. They looked like an elephant or something like that, And we drove over wires, telephone, electric, and all on the ground. We drove over all of that getting into town.
Was everyone okay?
Yeah, everybody was okay of our family. Well, my daughter and her husband lived in a large stucco apartment, and as soon as it was over, of course they were all right, but as soon as it was over, he went out to hunt for the dead. I guess they were just dead strung around, and she opened the door. It was a glass in the top in the door, When she opened it, a splinter of glass came down and cut her leg. That was the only one of them, our family at all, that was hurt. Not very much, but it was a terrible deal. Like I say, I believe anything I hear about a tornado.
I don't.
You don't?
Did you have to take anybody out to your farm
No.
that was homeless? Didn't
No.
have any place to go?
No, we didn't take anybody. I don't know, there was, my husband's brother had this man had worked for him for several years, and Felix, you know, Felix Little was their name, and they had a small home and had a little baby about, it was about 3 or 4 months old, little baby in its crib, and that storm hit, and it took the house. They never did find the baby. It was never found.
That the baby that was lost
Never
and never was
found.
found.
Mhm. And anyway,
There was several that never
his
found.
back
Several never-
was nothing but big splinters just all over his back, and that's the way it did a lot of people, I guess. Just nothing but just splinters. But I guess they've had even this year had several bad ones, haven't they?
Yeah.
Over by Tulsa and several towns over there.
Oh, we heard that there were babies found clear across the river on the north
Yeah, I
side.
expect. And there were several girls that were in the hospital, and they never did find their parents. I mean, they never did locate who they belonged to, you know, or anything, or whether their parents were killed or not. But those girls lived, and later on, a good many years after that, we heard from them. People heard from those girls. They'd grown up and got married, and so they wrote to somebody here in Woodward, I guess, and we found out they were all right. But they never did connect them with their folks.
What'd they do? Just were they adopted out or what?
What?
Were they adopted out or?
I just don't know. We just heard they were in the hospital and couldn't locate their folks, and then we never heard from them again till they were grown, I guess, and married. I lived down in eastern Oklahoma somewhere. But well, a tornado, you don't want to fool around with them very much. That's all I could say about a tornado.
Well, anything else?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
Did you want to know some more about the early days, or?
Yeah. What? Do you have anything else to talk about?
Have you thought of something we haven't thought of?
No, I guess not. I told when I started teaching in school, and I taught 5 years, and I told most everything that I remember.
When did you
About
start
the-
teaching?
I was 17 when I started teaching school, and there's a fella in here. He's on the other side. That remembers me. He was 3 years old when I taught the home school, and they'd have programs in the at night, you know, and they'd bring all the little kids. Well, he remembers me. He remembers my name and remembers all about me teaching this school.
Huh.
And he's in here. I see him every once in a while. You can't believe that. Some people think, you know, you just make that up. But
What was the name of the school you started teaching in?
Senate School. It was 9 miles north and 2 west.
Of Woodward?
Mm-hmm.
How many students did you have?
I expect I have 45 anyway, just a
Was it
one room,
one room?
all 8 grades.
How'd you teach all 8 grades at once?
Well, I don't know.
Well, you had to organize the classes.
Oh, yes. They had like the 4th grade arithmetic, and they would be in a class, you know, and all of that. And, they would be in different classes, of course.
And did you have a recitation seat?
Have
And
what?
a recitation seat?
No,
Bench
never heard
where
of
they all
that.
came up and sit in a row in front of the teacher and on a big long bench? Did you have it?
Did you do that?
Yes.
I bet you taught school.
Yes, I taught
Oh,
school.
yes, that's good. No, I never heard of that.
How
I guess
did you seat your 4th graders in all in a group so you could teach them right in sitting in their seats?
No, I don't think so. Just, The kids, some of those boys that went to school to me, you know, was older than I was. Some of those big boys. You tell something about your school.
I need your signature right there, your autograph.
Just my glasses. Just me?
Yeah.
I'll see.
You got Charles.
And they took part of that bridge, piling and all, and put it on the west side of the river, up on the west side bank up there.
That was
Now, how could they do that now?
that was in 47.
Yeah. They did that. I went
It had to
down
be
to it.
circling.
I had the bridge was out.
It had
and
to
I
be
couldn't
circling.
stand it.
Huh.
Would your daughter